right, welcome to the third episode of A Conversation With. And today it's a conversation with Cory Elia. Cory Elia and I have a background for sure. He's worked for Wilkins Portland for quite a while, managing editor right now, and he's been deep in the protests downtown, the protests against police brutality, the protests that kicked up since the death of George Floyd. And thanks for having the conversation. Yeah. How's it going? How you doing?
Pretty good.
Okay.
It's been an interesting month and a half.
Yeah, I imagine.
There's a lot been going on.
Yeah. So just to get to the questions, and what we do is I gave the questions to Cory on the front end, so you have some time to think and reflect on how he wants to respond, and we'll kind of take it from there. So the first question is, how did you get into protest coverage?
So protest coverage actually wasn't like my first thing that I really wanted to report on. When I started reporting, I was actually reporting on the houseless situation. That's due to personal lived experience. Protest coverage actually came about when one of my managing editors or assistant editors, news editors at PSU Vanguard, Fiona Spring, she actually mentioned that she was going to go check out a protest and asked if I wanted to go along as a photographer. I agreed. It was my first time. I think it was like June 29th of 2018. I think that was my first protest I went and covered with her. It was pretty intense then. It was a protest rally between Proud Boys and Antifa, quote unquote.
Right.
The black blocs that everybody wants to try and label as Antifa.
Right.
That was a very intense situation. From there, a lot of the student journalists at the Vanguard kind of stepped back from the protest coverage because of not only that, but the August 4th, 2018 rally. There's actually a pretty famous picture of me covering that rally and sitting there recording with my phone.
Yes.
I think it was used in the Willamette Week. It was in an article talking about how Chief Outlaw was just saying that protesters went and complained about getting their butts kicked or whatever. After that rally, a lot of student journalists weren't covering these protests anymore, and I alone was sitting there trying to cover as many as possible. I've even covered Occupy ICE. So, when it came up to these protests, I was pretty much primed and ready, sitting there okay, this is Portland protests taking back off it has in the past.
Yeah.
But I kind of quickly realized that this was a movement. This wasn't just any protest, any rally, anything like that. It was a cultural movement, and I wasn't fully prepared for it.
Yeah. What do you think? Why do you think mainstream media has decided to step back from covering these protests? There's a danger there. That's part of it, right?
So when it comes to mainstream media, one of the things that I noticed is a lot of these people in the protests, they are not very trusting of them. Mm-hmm. And that's because it seems to be that they are going for the sensationalistic angle of the situation. They're like, oh, this happened, and, not really profiling what's happening otherwise, clashes between protesters, but they don't sit there and profile the speeches that were given hours before that are very highly impactful, culturally, emotionally, mentally, psychologically.
Yeah.
They don't cover that kind of stuff. They're looking for the sensationalistic angle. And that kind of results in them being shunted out of these protests. When it comes down to it, myself and a lot of the other independent journalists out there, we're able to get a better view of what's going on because we are able to mix amongst the crowd. And one factor there is the mainstream media crews usually have a reporter, camera guy, and a security person optional.
Yeah.
And so you've already got a very obvious setup. You're rolling around, you're in an obvious crew, and you're more spotted. For these ones in particular, it seems like officers are aiming for journalists, independent, mainstream, doesn't matter. There was footage from a month ago of Jimenez from CNN getting arrested on camera while reporting. And this seems to be more or less being done because officers are trying to suppress the amount of people that are seeing what is happening between them and protesters.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems so. So you've been targeted out there, it seems like.
Yeah, I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
There's been, I think almost every single journalist that has been out there has had an instance where they felt they were being targeted by officers. There's actual footage that I have seen and have archived of one officer one night when there was actually very few journalists out in the field and it was only live streamers and regular citizens, of a girl. She was recording, I think it was an arrest happening. And as she was recording it, one of the officers points at her and says, "Press, press, media." And she reiterates in her video that that's what happened. And it's very chilling.
Yeah.
Because that means they were looking for people with cameras that night.
Yeah. Not okay, yeah. And we'll get into more of the chilling effect on journalists and also the media in general, just like in a second. Yeah. So what has changed? Is that a new thing? Has that changed since when you first started covering them?
So a lot of times when I was covering some of these protests, I can cite back to August 4th, 2018 and Occupy ICE for examples of this. August 4th, they were shoving back journalists and like we were protesters, like we were part of the group, like we weren't identified as members of the press.
Yeah.
Whether it be press badges or insignias on our clothing that says press, or even any kind of wear that says what publication we're with.
Yeah.
They were treating us the same way, but not with this level of hostility.
Yeah. So that's definitely changed. So how do the indie journalists support each other down there? I feel like talk about that. There's definitely a crew of people. It seems like I feel like it's a new dawning of like support for indie media. There's something happening down there. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, there is. By my best estimate, it's about 8 legitimate, and I use legitimate loosely because honestly, when it comes down to it, we're in a new age in media.
Yeah.
So anybody really can just pick up a camera and be a reporter. It's when you're sitting there and taking your own opinion out of the reporting and reporting fact, maybe with a little bit of humor in there, that you are actually able to sit there and call yourself a legitimate reporter. A lot of the citizen reporters out there are sitting there talking very negatively about officers, very negatively about alt-rights and all that, and the conservative right-wingers, and some of that right there kind of disqualifies them instantly. And it kind of needs to be addressed, but at the same time, when it comes down to us indie journalists, we're looking at the situation, we're supporting each other as best we can.
Yeah.
If somebody needs a piece of equipment, we just kind of, hey, I need this. A good instance of this is Tuck Woodstock. She's a reporter for the Mercury. And one night I was sitting there and all my battery packs had died. My phone was on 5% battery. And I was sitting there recording on the front lines. And I looked at Tuck, I was like, do you have any kind of battery pack, anything? And she had like a tiny,
Okay, I was wondering,
Yeah, they had a tiny, I want to say it was like a 2,000 milliamp, which is just enough to barely give you like a half a battery charge on your phone.
Yeah.
But it's a quick, good one, good one to have in an emergency. But she handed me that battery pack. She's like, here, use it until, it dies or your phone dies on you or whatever. I was like, yeah, thank you, That's the kind of thing. And when one of us gets stuck behind lines, if we've been like tear gassed too much or been sprayed, you usually see another independent journalist sitting there swooping them up from the crowd and pulling them aside and being like treating them as best as they can. If officers start coming up on those, they'll sit there and be like, oh, we need to move now, and trying their best to sit there and not only take care of the other person, but try and get them out of there so that they're not sitting there dealing with the conflict with officers. We're supporting each other too we have like a small group of when we're coordinating days off. That way we're not all just showing up in the field ran at the same time or none of us at once.
Right.
So we're kind of reaching out to each other and like, hey, I'm working tonight. Hey, I'm going to be out tonight. Hey, I'm taking tonight off.
Yeah.
Just so we know what's going on.
Yeah. It's interesting to me is like you're studying journalism and you have a lot of experience as a journalist, but then there are people who are just kind of like, hey, this needs to happen. I'm going to get out there with a camera and get out there. So it's interesting to see how some people are just naturals at this. Have you seen that? I mean, have you given any guidance to people since you have more experience?
Yeah, there has been a few live streamers that have appeared during all this that have actually been doing great work. One person I'd love to give a shout out to is his Twitter handle is pdocumentarian.
Okay.
On Twitter, and he Portland Independent Documentarians is what his full title on Twitter is.
Cool.
And his name's Justin, and he's been an independent documentarian out there, and he's been very fair, very honest, reporting the facts, not trying to throw much of humor even.
Yeah.
Like most of us actual independent journalists that have been out there for the month and a half have started to do, because we're hitting a point of stress.
Yeah.
That if we're not releasing it through this little bit of humor, we're going to crack.
I hear you, yeah. I've been out there a couple times to support you and also to replace you when you've taken a night off. And it's hard to be objective when you have stuff flying at your head, when your people are being injured and the police are knocking people around. It's difficult to keep yourself out of it.
Well, I've sat there and I've tried to interview officers at the back door of the Justice Center, which is the front door of the downtown police headquarters. That one still gets me. Whatever.
Yeah.
But literally, I've sat there and tried to interview officers about what's going on, what's happening, saying, hey, can I talk to like a commander or like a sergeant or like a detective, and be like, hey, what's going on tonight? What kind of concerns do you officers have?
Right.
But they won't talk to us.
Right. They're just like
they just treat me like I'm another protester. When I've been sitting there multiple times with my press badges and trying to identify to them that I am legitimate. I have multiple press badges. I have been published over 100 different times. I have photos and videos that have been seen internationally, but it doesn't matter to them.
Right. It's not for them to decide who is press and who isn't. I mean, everybody should have the right to film and assemble. Yeah. And the community support, let's talk about that. I've seen that happen. It's beautiful.
Yeah, the community support's been plentiful during all this, in so many different ways. Yeah, I was thinking about this question before you were on your way over here, and I was just like, this is one of the harder questions. There's community support funds that are set up for people that get arrested during the protests.
Yeah.
Downtown during these, there's community like barbecues, stuff like that. People can just go grab food.
Riot Ribs, yeah. We just run them today.
The Riot Ribs, yes.
Yeah.
I was just trying to remember the name. Riot Ribs. I've only been by those guys a couple times, and like I don't think I've even had anything from them yet, besides maybe a drink.
Yeah.
And that was just because it was way late at night and there was nowhere else to grab a water bottle.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I need something to drink. I think it was a sparkling water I grabbed from them. But still, they're there. It's community support, and it's amazing to see. The community support's not only being shown towards the protesters, but also us independent journalists that are out there. About half of us, maybe 3/4 of us, we're not with an official publication. So we're actually sitting there and posting like our Cash Apps, our Venmos, our PayPals to our Twitter accounts, so that while we're out there recording this stuff and recording it live, people have the option to make donations to us. And without that, we wouldn't be making nothing. I would be out for the first week. I was literally out there making no money because I wasn't thinking to do it that way.
Yeah.
And ended up taking a couple other journalists to show me, hey, this is how we're going to do this to be able to pay for ourselves to be out here with them. And that community support has helped be able to fuel me and keep me alive, keep me housed while being able to report.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you've been injured out there a few times. I mean, you've had officers put your hands on you multiple times.
Yeah, and with the cases that I have going on right now, I probably shouldn't speak to that too much.
Okay.
But I can say it wasn't just me.
Yeah.
Out of the journalists, out of the reporters that this has happened to, I hesitate to say it's every single one of them, but I think it, at this point, has been every single independent journalist that is out there, and every legacy reporter that has dared to even get close, that has either been harassed or assaulted by officers.
Yeah. Let me take one second. So, you've taken a few days of break, but have you heard of the difference between the feds being out there as opposed to just Portland police?
Yeah, the feds changing overhand from the PPB and the other, I think it was 11 different law enforcement agencies that were out there.
Yeah.
Alongside PPB. When it changed hands to the federal, being DHS and Federal Protective Services and U.S. Marshals and all that, it was an interesting situation. The change of hands happened right after PPB pretty much got muzzled on the things that they could use during when they declared it a riot.
Interesting.
And most of the time when they're declaring a riot, they're doing so for little things. The tiniest of things. And it seems to be an excuse for them to declare it a riot.
Right.
When it could be easily de-escalated by officers retreating back that have triggered the response from the crowd, or another scenario such as that.
Yeah.
It seems to be that the federal officers stepped in because PPB wasn't allowed to treat the protesters like they were before.
Yeah.
And all of this is under order of President Trump, who at the very beginning of these Black Lives Matter, George Floyd protests against police brutality and systemic racism, pretty much declared it. And I think the statement is recorded of him saying that the mainstream media or the media is the enemy. And he may have meant that for CNN and a few of the other bigger guys that he doesn't appreciate, but his constituents took that and pretty much meant it as any media that is not representing his viewpoint.
Yeah, it seems to be definitely un-American and somewhat of a switch.
And therefore I feel that the feds are just intervened here and stepped in for PPB so that they could continue to brutalize protesters and media alike.
Yeah, the one person who got shot last night just kind of hanging out on the sidewalk. Something rolled to him, and he kicked it back, and then next thing you know...
Actually, with that scenario, I've deeply studied the scene and what happened, and I was actually there not long after that, and talked to a few people about what occurred.
Yeah.
It was a canister that was fired out. It hit him on the side of the foot. He kicked it aside. As he kicked it aside, he realized it was starting to roll underneath a car. And so he went and grabbed it real quick and just tossed it. Didn't throw it, didn't aim it at anybody. Literally grabbed and tossed it out into the middle of the street so it was away from the car. And then continued to hold up his speaker or boombox or whatever it was. And as he's sitting there with it over his head for a couple seconds, he gets shot and drops. And looking at that, I was in this state of shock. Excuse me, that's beyond uncalled for.
Yeah, it's awful.
He was simply trying to clear that grenade out from underneath a car. That could have caused a bigger issue if that grenade decided to go incendiary because it was sitting there motionless. He might have been preventing a major catastrophe right there with dozens of people around the car.
Yeah.
But they didn't even think about that. They just aimed at him because he touched one of their munitions.
Right. Certainly wasn't endangering any of the officers.
Yeah, I don't think he was endangering any of the officers or any of the protesters.
Right.
He was actually trying to prevent something.
Yeah. Yeah. It's ridiculous. Yeah, so was there a specific moment when you were made the decision to push back on the violence down there with the lawsuit?
Not really. It all kind of built up.
Yeah.
After the first incident, which I think was around the second or the third, I wasn't really thinking about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going for monetary on this. It's the principle about going after the press.
Yeah.
The independents out there. I mean, we don't really have much representation from publications and stuff. And even the ones with publications, they are also putting their safety at risk.
Yeah. Right, and publishing in general, I mean, it's harder to do media these days.
Yeah.
And then you see this pushback, it's not a good combo.
I mean, even after my second incident. I mean, after my first incident, I wanted to, but I didn't know how to handle that situation. Yeah. I'm not looking for money on this. I want this to be addressed. The press badge should be respected, and that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here as an observer and a reporter. That's all I am. I'm not trying to cause issues. I'm not trying to cause trouble. I'm not an antagonist towards police. And it seems to be like I was treated as such the entire time.
So Leslie couldn't be here tonight, but she's also part of the lawsuit. And she's had officers put their hands on her as well, right?
Yeah.
A couple times.
And like I said with the situation, I can't speak much to that.
Yeah.
With it being her, I can't speak much to that. She was supposed to be here. She's running a little bit late.
Right. It happens. And we are socially distanced in the park here. Yeah, modern times.
Yeah, modern times.
You do what you can. Yeah, so what's next for you in your reporting and your journalism career?
Well, of course I'm going to follow this until it ends. Will it end?
Yeah.
I mean, will it just be another instance of something like this occurring, like the George Floyd incident, or another instance of police brutality or systemic racism showing its head that starts up the protests again?
Yeah.
I'm going to follow this till it ends, but I'm mainly trying to get back towards my reporting on the homeless situation, houseless situation, depending on what terminology you prefer. Simply because that's where my passion started in this field, and that's where I love to report on, because I feel that when it comes down to this kind of reporting, independent reporting or insightful reporting advocacy, without that lived experience, there's no authenticity to it.
Yeah, makes it hard. Yeah. Yeah, it's we've talked about this before. Just the switch has gone from the streets, and now you're pushing back in the courts, and I think that's where the move needs to happen. So.
Yeah. As far as I can tell right now, there's like 5 different lawsuits involving journalists, either solo or as a group. And then I think there's like 9 different cases of protesters that have been severely injured. Yeah, this situation has gotten really scary, especially with the addition of the feds. It's went from being just all this beautiful muraling that was showing up I mean, people don't like the graffiti, but when you look at graffiti, honestly, it's street art.
Yeah.
And sometimes a lot of it can actually have a lot of beauty behind it, even if it was put up feloniously.
Yeah.
Yeah, it moved from the speeches, from all that, to purely police brutality, and it's turned into something that's really scary.
Yeah.
I already, at the middle of the night, wake up with night terrors every once in a while. Simply from the smallest noise. I have to fall asleep with the TV on right now.
Yeah.
Just so that I don't have to sit there and wake up to that. And then I have to make sure that like my TV and my internet's running okay throughout the night, because if that cuts off, I get woke up.
Yeah.
There's probably going to be some serious PTSD issues that occur after this. I already had some hearing loss in my left ear from August 4th. I had a flash grenade go off. It had to have been within like 5-10 yards of my left ear. So I had some hearing loss damage from that. Probably have a little bit more now.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah. I'm definitely going to have to go, see an ear doctor after this. I've inhaled a ton of tear gas. That's been fun. And then pepper sprayed multiple times. That was fun. Yeah. It's been an interesting situation. Probably going to have to write a book after all this.
Please do, yeah.
And it might just be I have to write the book just to be able to get back into actually writing. It might end up being I'm just going to do photo and video for a while.
Yeah.
Every time I start getting my hands onto a keyboard, it's difficult to write. There's too much going on in my head. Even right now, I'm trying to pay attention to the camera, but I'm kind of like drifting off.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know where my reporting will go in the future. If another situation like this occurs, I would never turn down the chance to cover it, because I can get in there, I can cover the situation in a way that not many people can. And I feel that it needs to be done. But yeah, it's going to be a bit of a rocky road recovery from this one.
Yeah, well, take your time with it, and we're here to support you. Yeah.
And I've been hearing that a lot from the community, and that's kind of one of the things that really warms my heart.
Yeah.
Is that I feel like I'm not alone in this. From the beginning of May, I've gained getting close to 12,000 followers on Twitter just from covering the protests and what has happened with me along the road.
Yeah.
And me getting thrusted into the middle of that was not something I really wanted to be part of. I didn't want to go gonzo. I don't know if people know what gonzo journalism is.
Explain,
too much,
please. Yeah.
But basically, it's placing yourself into the middle of the story of the news reporting, and I didn't really want that, but it became that after a little while, and I'm trying to still pull myself back from that.
There's no way to avoid that. You have police knocking you around and throwing stuff at your head. It's hard not to take it personal. Yeah.
And gonzo journalism is pretty much a terminology coined by Hunter S. Thompson. And I guess with this whole situation, the best phrase of his that I can quote is when the weird, what was it? What
is it? When the going gets tough.
When the going gets weird, the word weird turn fresh.
Yes. Yep.
Yes. And these indeed are weird times. We're in the middle of the pandemic, in the middle of protests, and the weirdness between all of it, the George Floyd situation having not been able to breathe. The pandemic, which is actually focused on the respiratory illnesses and causes the fact that you can't breathe. And then the use of tear gas during these protests, which results in people not being able to breathe. There seems to be a reoccurring theme here.
Yeah.
And that's kind of troubling to me. I don't know if there's major significance behind that, but I've noticed it, and it's troubling.
It's a thread, yeah. It's a time of change, yeah. I mean, it's time to get police accountability, like real accountability, in Portland and in the country too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where do you see journalism going? Like, this wasn't on the list of questions, and
this is a hard one.
Yeah, I think we're just getting
like a loaded question, and it's an extra bonus.
The chat side of the conversation.
Where is journalism heading?
I mean, there's this indie thing. There's social media. There's the indie journalism. There's the loss of publishing money. There's
all that. Change. And when you come down to it, I'm just sitting here pointing towards extreme sensationalism being with the survivor in all of this, and it's not a pretty thing.
I hear you, yeah.
Loss of ad revenue, loss of readership, the transition from print to online, the lack of local publications, and then even the lack of rural publications out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
There is a major lack of news content that is properly informing their citizens. It's creating a situation where people are uninformed.
Yeah.
And are just kind of guessing off of best judgment, and sometimes that best judgment hasn't been created in the correct way, especially if you look at our public education system. I mean, I myself have a whole smorgasbord of issues. I've come back from being homeless, drug addicted, criminal. I'm dyslexic. All those things should have been majorly playing against me for having any kind of a real future, and they probably still are. I literally can't craft a tweet without messing up one word. Yeah.
But you persevere.
I persevere.
I think because I mean, this is my opinion. We've worked together a lot, and because I think your heart's in the right place, and people see that.
I try to be true to who I am. I try to be real.
Yeah.
And sometimes I have to kind of sit there and hesitate about how I'm going to present what I'm going to say to the world, because being a little too real is a little controversial at times.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for the documentary we're working on. That's another Village Portland project. Do you want to talk about that? We're way off script, but
we're talking about the Voices of the Village.
Yeah.
So the Voices of the Village documentary series was supposed to be focused on all 6, but now there's another 3.
There's a couple more, yeah, right?
Added to it. The homeless villages that have appeared around the city of Portland. And we're counting the Tri-County here because there are a couple that are further out. We were going to focus on all the villages, the granddaddy of them all, Dignity. And which is the oldest and has been around for 20 years. It's the first episode of our documentary series we're working on. When Dignity Village was started, there was so much contention, controversy behind it, and I mean, they eventually was able to settle with the city, get a little plot of land, which wasn't even that really desirable.
Right.
If you look at it, they're still to this day having issues. Yeah, that documentary series is a total passion project. I want to give a voice back to the villagers. They're at the different villages, because I feel like sometimes they haven't been able to have a say in what's going on. And that giving them the chance to speak their truth might actually be able to create a little bit of change around the situation, because people sometimes feel that these requests or needs or demands, or however you want to frame it, are coming from people that don't really speak for the houseless or homeless community, and are just trying to make a buck off of it.
Yeah.
And in that instance, why not give the voice back to the people that need it, that are trying to speak to what they want or need to be able to piece their life back together and become functioning members of society again.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing, because there's a difference between most homeless services and what happens at these peer-run camps. I mean, they're actually a part of putting their life back together, like you say. That's, yeah. Can you speak to that? I mean, how is maybe the contrast between typical homeless services and then what happens at places like Dignity?
Yeah. I mean, I've volunteered at a number of different resource centers, warming shelters, meal services. Oh wow, I'm going out the list. Oh man, that's a lot. This is getting long.
Overnight shelters, the
overnight,
warming shelters.
yeah, overnights. I've volunteered a lot of places, not only when I was homeless, but also afterwards. There is what is known as the compassion fatigue.
Yeah.
In my field of work with journalism, it's known as journalism fatigue. It's basically going so much deep into these situations that are highly emotional, traumatic, and all that, and being hit by it in such a level that you just get burned out. Emotionally, physically, mentally. It's happened to me during these protests a couple times. I've had to take days off when I was feeling it oncoming. Andrew took my place when that was happening.
Yeah.
But sometimes some of these workers that are in these shelters and stuff, they can experience compassion fatigue, where they're done. And they need a break, but they don't get the chance to have a break because there's nobody else to take their place.
Right.
Because there is a serious lack of volunteers, of social workers, stuff like that. And it results in these people turning bitter. And, they try and keep up their job, try and keep up their compassion, and try and maintain themselves. But at times, their interactions with some of the homeless, houseless community comes off very negative to the homeless houseless, like they're being talked down to, they're being treated like children, like they're morons, like they're mentally diminished in some form, and it's demeaning, and then that results in a negative interaction between workers and clients, and it's not a good dynamic. These villages are peer run. These are individuals that know what has happened with the other individuals around them, have had similar lived experiences, and therefore their community. Something happens with those people, they can handle it a lot better than these workers who are already overstressed.
Yeah. And they're setting a good example. I mean, you being out there, I feel like you're a shining example of how a person can turn their life around and find purpose and find a career.
I'm like I said earlier, I'm trying.
Yeah, man.
It's like, I guess there was some old saying, there is no try, there's just do. But is that accurate? Is it just do? Isn't that the Nike slogan? Just do it.
Little Yoda, little Nike in there. Yeah.
I feel it. Like, tighten up your bootstraps. Get going. But I feel like that's just ignoring past traumas.
Right.
Stresses, PTSD, all that.
Yeah.
And that's not fair.
And turning around, when people see you as something, it's hard to kind of take back your self-worth and your dignity.
I mean, I myself have been working for years to try and save up the money to get my teeth fixed, and I'm still struggling to do it. I might have made enough money set aside to do some payments and get it all done because of the protests and some of the donations from the community, which I'm immensely grateful for, because that means I can actually get my teeth done.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
I've been clean and sober off drugs for 6 years, unless you want to count cannabis, which I know not many people are anymore. It's Oregon.
Yeah.
Get used to it. Yeah. This whole situation, these protests, the pandemic, leading into this, my reporting. I never expected to be at this place in my life where I've done a complete 180, and then I'm known. Like, I was used to just being a high school dropout who turned to a drug addict, became homeless, and then turned to crime just to try and live.
Yeah.
And big shocker, that's what happens to a lot of Americans.
Yeah.
And yeah, my main way I decided to get away from that was by seeking out knowledge and community. And I'm glad I did.
Yeah.
I was going down a road that I was probably going to end up in prison. Yeah, or dead.
Yeah. Was there a moment when you decided to turn that around? I mean, can you speak to your process at all?
That one was a bit harder to narrow down specifically. There was a few instances where I was in and out of jail for things I did do and things I didn't do that I was being accused of. And just because of how I was being at the time and what my life was, they wouldn't believe me regarding which was actually true and which weren't, when I was trying to be truthful to them so that I could have gotten out of the situation a little bit less impacted than I was.
Yeah.
And then I resulted in me spending like a month or so between MCDC and Inverness. And I think I did a week and a half in isolation during that time. And I came to a deep, deep realization at that point while reading a lot of different literature, not only history books, but also novels, everything. I didn't really sleep that entire time.
Yeah.
Just read. Came to a realization that at some point in my life, I didn't want to just be stuck where I was, if not in jail, on the streets, or dead. I wanted something better.
Yeah.
And it was around that time that I was just like, yeah, I'm done.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah. Teaching that is probably more difficult. Or, yeah, because you can't make somebody do what they don't want to do.
Yeah, you gotta want to change.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to change.
Anything else you'd like to discuss when it comes to the protests or
Just
where you're headed?
really just be good to each other, stay healthy, stay safe.
All right. Thanks for your honesty and your time and your work. It's been wonderful working with you.
There's a lot of emotion behind some of it.
All right. Thanks, Joe.